The house had grown quieter with every passing year, once filled with laughter, arguments, and the faint hum of a television playing in the background. It now echoed with the sharp rhythm of hospital machines and the sound of labored breathing. Please stay with me as I tell you my story. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for your support. Means the world to us. Back to my story. For her, 28 and just starting to figure out adulthood, life had been reduced to a cycle of doctor's appointments, medication schedules, and emergency runs to the hospital in the dead of night. Her father's illness wasn't a sudden tragedy, it was a slow, relentless thief. It stole his strength, his independence, and the sparkle in his eyes. And though she grieved the man he used to be, she never abandoned him. She moved back home when things became unbearable for him alone, putting her own ambitions on hold. College friends moved to new cities, traveled, fell in love, while she learned to decipher medical terms and fill out insurance paperwork. It was exhausting, but it was also intimate in ways she couldn't explain. Their bond deepened through late-night conversations when he couldn't sleep, and through small moments when he'd whisper, "Thank you for staying." Every sacrifice felt both heavy and strangely meaningful. Her sister, meanwhile, remained miles away, living her life untouched by the constant shadow of sickness. She visited when it was convenient, holidays, birthdays, but never lingered long enough to feel the weight of it. By the time the end came, she had already been mourning him for years. The funeral was painful, yes, but not as painful as watching him slip away in slow motion, standing by his side until the very last breath. She knew she had given everything she had, and deep down, she believed he knew it too. While she shouldered the weight of their father's illness, her sister's absence became an ache that gnawed at her quietly. At first, she tried to understand. After all, her sister lived out of state, had her own commitments, and often said, "I can't just drop everything." But as the months turned into years, those words began to sound less like a reason and more like an excuse. Her sister's visits were rare, almost ceremonial: Christmas, a birthday, a short weekend trip where she'd sweep in, shower their father with affection, post smiling pictures on social media, and then vanish before the exhaustion of reality could touch her. She always seemed to find time for her career, her friends, her vacations, everything except the hard, unglamorous truth of caregiving. It wasn't that she was cruel, she wasn't heartless, but there was a distance she kept, a line she never crossed. And while the protagonist tried not to resent it, the bitterness grew in quiet corners of her heart. Every night she sat by their father's bedside alone, every bill she scrambled to pay, every moment she thought she couldn't go on, her sister wasn't there. Her father noticed it too. Sometimes, with sadness in his eyes, he'd whisper, "She means well, she's just not like you." It was meant to comfort, but it stung, because being not like her meant one daughter was there, sacrificing everything, while the other floated through with barely a scratch. By the time her sister boarded her return flights, smiling and carefree, the gulf between them had widened into something almost unbridgeable. And though unspoken, a question lingered in the air every time. When the time comes, will she even be here? The last months of her father's life were the hardest. His body had grown frail, his steps unsteady, his once strong voice reduced to whispers. She could see it in his eyes, the way he lingered on her face a little longer, as though memorizing it, as though preparing to say goodbye without words. She became his shadow, every medication, every checkup, every midnight fall. It was her arms that caught him, her voice that reassured him, her presence that carried him through. There were moments when she felt like she was drowning, yet she refused to leave him alone in the storm. If he was going to face the end, she would face it with him. Her sister came once during those final weeks. The visit was brief. She brought flowers, kissed his forehead, and made promises about coming back soon. But as quickly as she arrived, she was gone again, back to her life, her freedom, her untouched world. The contrast was sharp and bitter. On the final night, the house was silent except for the uneven rhythm of his breathing. She sat beside him, holding his hand, whispering that it was okay to let go. Tears blurred her vision as she pressed his frail fingers to her lips. With one last exhale, the man who had raised her, loved her, and leaned on her for everything in his final years, was gone. When morning came, her world had shifted. Grief pressed on her chest, but there was also an odd stillness, like part of her had already been grieving for years. And in that silence, she felt the weight of what she had given and what she had lost. Her father was gone, but his final days had bound them in a way nothing could break. The small conference room smelled faintly of old paper and polished wood. The lawyer shuffled through a neat stack of documents, his voice steady and emotionless as he began to read. She sat with her mother and sister at the long table, her hands trembling under the surface, still raw from grief. Her father's words, written months before his passing, carried weight heavier than stone. He left his classic car, his pride and joy to her sister, along with his collection of jewelry that he had always promised would be hers one day. Her sister smiled faintly, pride glinting in her eyes as if she had been given the most meaningful gifts of all. But then the lawyer paused, his gaze shifted to her. The bulk of her father's liquid assets, savings accounts, investments, the nest egg he had guarded carefully for decades, were to go to her. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to change her life, enough to pay off her student loans, finally breathe without debt, and maybe even buy the house she had only dared to dream of. The lawyer read her father's note aloud. To my daughter who gave her time, her energy, and her heart to care for me when I could not care for myself. This is not payment, it is recognition. You carried more than your share. May this help you build the future you deserve. Tears welled in her eyes. For the first time in months, she felt seen, understood, validated. Her sacrifices hadn't gone unnoticed. But when she glanced at her sister, the smile was gone, her jaw tightened, her eyes narrowed, and in that instant, she knew the will had not just divided assets, it had drawn a line between them. In the weeks after the will was read, a strange calm settled over her life. For the first time in years, she could breathe without the constant weight of overdue bills and endless medical costs pressing down on her. She paid off her student loans in a single click, tears slipping down her cheeks as she watched the number drop to zero. For the first time, the future didn't feel like a distant dream. It felt possible. There was relief in knowing her father had thought of her, that he had left behind not just words, but the means to rebuild her life. Every late night, every tear shed at his bedside, every sacrifice had led to this moment of recognition. She whispered thank you into the quiet of her room, believing somehow he could still hear. But alongside the relief, resentment lingered like a shadow. Whenever she spoke with her sister, there was a sharpness to the conversations that hadn't been there before. Her sister rarely mentioned the car or the jewelry. Instead, she circled the topic of fairness. Comments slipped out. Dad always favored you in the end. Or it must be nice not to worry about money. Each one stung, reopening wounds that had never fully healed. She wanted to scream that this wasn't favoritism. It was acknowledgement of reality. She had been the one scrubbing floors, making meals, holding their father's hand through nights filled with pain. She had been the one who put her life on hold. But instead of arguments, she stayed quiet, nursing the bitterness in her chest. Relief and resentment danced side by side in her heart, each one refusing to let the other go. And deep down, she knew it was only the beginning of a larger storm. Spring brought news that should have been joyful. Her sister called one afternoon, her voice bubbling with excitement. He proposed, we're engaged. The words were cheerful, almost musical. And for a moment, she smiled too. After all, despite their differences, her sister deserved happiness. They talked about the ring, the proposal story, and how their mother had cried with delight. For a while, it almost felt like the old days. Before illness, before bitterness had carved a canyon between them. But the more details her sister shared, the more uneasy she felt. It wasn't going to be a simple wedding. It was going to be the wedding, a grand destination resort, a guest list that seemed to grow by the week, a designer dress with a price tag larger than her annual rent, an open bar, a live band, a luxury honeymoon, all painted as necessities, not choices. Her sister laughed as she rattled off the plans, saying things like, it's once in a lifetime, and you can't put a price on memories. But deep down, she wondered if her sister could even afford groceries after a wedding like that. She tried not to say much, offering small congratulations, but her thoughts twisted into knots. Her sister had always been someone who wanted the world to see her shine, no matter the cost. And now, it seemed she was aiming for a wedding that looked more like a movie than a marriage. At first, she assumed they would just go into debt, that it was their choice, their burden. But soon, she would learn the plan had another piece, a piece that pointed directly at her. It happened on a quiet Sunday afternoon. Her sister invited her out for coffee, saying they needed to talk. She arrived expecting wedding chatter, bridesmaids' dresses, invitations, maybe even a request for help with planning. But the moment she sat down, her sister's expression told her this wasn't small talk. Her sister leaned forward, hands wrapped around her latte, voice unusually soft. I need your help. Dad would have wanted you to use some of that inheritance to make my wedding special. The words hung heavy in the air. At first, she thought she'd misheard. But then came the number, not a small contribution, not a loan, $30,000. Enough to cover the venue and catering. Enough to erase years of her own careful savings, if she gave it away. Her chest tightened. She tried to keep her voice calm. That money was left to me for a reason. Dad wanted me to use it to build stability, to start fresh. But her sister's eyes narrowed. The sweetness in her tone evaporated. You're being selfish. You're choosing money over family. You wouldn't even have that money if it weren't for Dad, and he'd want it shared. She sat there stunned. The coffee had gone cold, the air between them tense. She thought of those long nights by her father's side, of his whispered gratitude, of the will that spelled out his wishes in black and white. Her refusal formed firmly in her chest. She shook her head, her voice steady. I'm not paying for your wedding. Her sister's lips pressed into a thin line, her face hard, and in that instant, she knew this wasn't just about money. This was about something much deeper. The silence after her refusal stretched longer than the coffee between them. Her sister blinked, as though she couldn't quite believe what she'd heard. Then her face hardened. So that's it, she said, her voice rising. You'd rather hoard money than help your only sister on the most important day of her life. Her heart pounded, but she didn't flinch. It's not hoarding, it's surviving. Dad gave me that money because he knew what I gave up for him. If he wanted to pay for your wedding, he would have left something for that. He didn't. Her sister scoffed, shaking her head. Unbelievable. You think you're some kind of martyr because you stayed with him. I had my life too. Just because I didn't drop everything doesn't mean I loved him any less. The words stung. She bit back the urge to list every night she'd stayed awake to make sure their father was still breathing. Every bill she scrambled to pay when money was thin. Every sacrifice her sister never had to make. Instead, she whispered, this isn't about love. It's about responsibility, and I carried it. Her sister pushed back her chair, the scrape loud enough to draw glances from other tables. You're punishing me, admit it. You hated me for not being around. And now, you've found your way to get even. She swallowed hard, her throat dry. Maybe part of that was true. Maybe resentment had seeped deeper than she realized. But it didn't change the fact that the money wasn't hers to demand. Her sister stormed out, leaving her alone at the table. She stared into her untouched coffee, a pit forming in her stomach. The war had only just begun. It didn't take long before her mother called. The tone of her voice was strained, clipped, carrying that familiar edge that always surfaced when she wanted something smoothed over. I heard about the fight. Her mother began without pleasantries. Why are you being so stubborn? Your sister just wants her wedding to be special. Don't you think your father would have wanted that too? She closed her eyes, fighting back the swell of frustration. Mom, Dad made his wishes clear. He put it in writing. That money was meant for me, he said so himself. But her mother wasn't swayed. A will is one thing, but family is another. You can't put money over blood. Your sister deserves your support. If you don't help her, she'll never forgive you. Do you want that on your conscience? The words hit like a hammer. Guilt flooded her chest, but beneath it simmered anger. For years, she had been the one holding everything together. Where had her mother been when she needed help juggling late-night emergencies and a job that barely covered the bills? Where had her sister been when the weight of caregiving broke her spirit? She tried to stay calm. Mom, I'm not refusing to help her out of spite. I just can't give her $30,000 for a wedding. That's not support. That's throwing away my future. Her mother's sigh was long, heavy. You're tearing this family apart. For once in your life, can't you think about peace instead of yourself? The line went silent after that, but her chest burned. Peace. She had sacrificed years of peace already for her father, for this family. And now, even after his death, they still wanted more from her. The first message came from a cousin she hadn't spoken to in months. Why are you being so harsh with your sister? It's just money, you'll make more. Her stomach dropped. She hadn't told anyone outside of her mother and sister about the fight. But soon, more texts followed. Aunts, cousins, even an old family friend. Each one echoing the same sentiment. That she was selfish. That her father would be ashamed. That she was punishing her sister for not being around when he was sick. It didn't take long to piece together what had happened. Her sister had started talking, carefully twisting the story so that she looked like the villain. According to her sister, the inheritance wasn't a gift for sacrifices made. It was extra money she was hoarding out of spite, refusing to share with family in need. At first, she tried to defend herself, responding with reason. Dad left me that money for a purpose. I can't use it for a party. But reason didn't carry far in the storm of whispers. Relatives who barely called during her father's illness now chimed in with advice on what family meant. Some were kinder, reminding her that her sacrifices had been seen, that she wasn't wrong to hold onto what was hers. But the louder voices were the ones calling her cold, selfish, greedy. She sat alone in her room one night, scrolling through the messages, the sting of betrayal sharp in her chest. It wasn't just her sister against her now, it was half the family. And the cruelest part, her sister's version of the story was spreading faster than the truth. The battle wasn't just about money anymore. It was about reputation, loyalty, and the fragile threads of family ties, unraveling one by one. Family gatherings had always been messy, but now they were unbearable. The air felt charged, like a storm waiting to break. Some relatives barely looked at her. Others spoke to her in clipped tones, their words dipped in judgment. Her phone buzzed constantly, with conflicting messages. One cousin sent, "Don't be so cold. It's just money. What's family for if not to help each other?" Another wrote, "You did everything for uncle. Don't let anyone guilt you out of what he left for you." The divide was clear. On one side were those who saw her as selfish, the daughter hoarding inheritance while her sister struggled. On the other were those who knew the truth, that she had been the one who carried the heavy load while her sister stayed absent. But being defended didn't soften the sting. Each text, each whisper at gatherings, each sideways glance added to the weight pressing on her chest. It wasn't just a disagreement anymore. It was a fracture running through the family, splitting bonds she once thought unbreakable. Her mother, caught in the middle but leaning toward her sister, only fueled the fire. "If you keep this up," she warned one evening, "you'll lose your sister forever. And maybe the rest of the family too." Those words echoed in her mind, long after the call ended. Was holding onto the money worth the cost of losing half her family? Was honoring her father's wishes worth being painted as the villain? She wanted to scream, to shake them and remind them, "Where were you when Dad was sick? Where were you when I needed help?" But she didn't. She stayed silent, watching the family tree splinter around her. And she knew the worst was yet to come. The text came late at night, long after she thought the argument had cooled. Her phone buzzed with a message from her sister, the words sharp even through the glow of the screen. "If you won't help with the wedding, then don't bother showing up. I won't have you there unless you do the right thing." Her breath caught in her throat. It wasn't just a request anymore. It was a demand wrapped in an ultimatum. Either pay $30,000 or be erased from one of the most important moments of her sister's life. She stared at the message, her hands trembling. This was her sister, the girl she had grown up with, the one she used to share secrets and late-night laughter with. Now their bond had a price tag, and the cost was her father's final gift to her. The next morning, their mother called. Frantic, "She means it," she said. "She won't invite you if you don't reconsider. Please, for the sake of peace, just help her. It's one day. Don't destroy your relationship over money." But to her, it wasn't about money anymore. It was about respect, about choices, about being seen not as a wallet to raid, but as a person who had already sacrificed everything once before. She typed a reply to her sister, each word heavy with finality. "If that's your decision, then so be it. I won't pay for your wedding. And if that means I can't be there, I'll accept it." She hit send, her heart hammering. For a moment, she wondered if this was the moment she lost her sister forever. Or perhaps, she thought grimly, her sister had chosen that path already. Her mother showed up unannounced one evening, her face etched with worry, her voice trembling with urgency. She didn't even wait to sit down before launching into it. "You can't let this go on," she said, pacing the living room. "Your sister is furious. The whole family is talking. Do you really want this fight to last forever? For once, can't you just give in for the sake of peace?" She swallowed hard, the words stinging more than she cared to admit. Peace? Her mother spoke about it, as though peace had been stolen by her refusal, not by her sister's demand. As though her years of sacrifice had meant nothing in the face of one extravagant wedding. "Mom," she said quietly, "I already gave up years of my life for this family. I took care of Dad when no one else would. I held everything together. And now you're asking me to give up the one thing he left me too. That's not peace, that's erasure." Her mother's eyes softened, but only for a moment. Then they hardened again, her voice rising. "You'll regret this stubbornness when your sister gets married without you there. When the family sees you as the one who refused to share. You'll regret it, and I won't be able to protect you from their judgment." Tears burned in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She met her mother's gaze steadily. "Dad made his choice, he wrote it down. He knew what he was doing. If you can't accept that, then the problem isn't me. It's everyone else rewriting his wishes." Her mother turned away, sighing heavily. as though the weight of the world rested on her shoulders. But for once she didn't feel guilty. She felt resolute. The days that followed were a blur of whispers and silence. Some relatives stopped calling altogether. Others sent passive-aggressive texts that left her staring at her phone in disbelief. Her sister's voice echoed in her head. "You're punishing me. You're selfish." Her mother's pleas gnawed at her in the quiet hours of the night. For the first time since her father's passing, she questioned herself. Maybe she was being cruel. Maybe she was clinging too tightly to money, letting resentment speak louder than love. She imagined her father's face, frail but gentle in his final days, asking her if this fight was worth it. The guilt pressed in like a vice. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, torn between loyalty to her father's written words and the unrelenting demand for family peace. The pressure was unbearable. She thought of the empty seat at the wedding if she stood her ground. She thought of being erased from photographs, stories, memories. Would she be remembered as the daughter who kept the money, or the sister who tore the family apart? But then another memory surfaced. Her father squeezing her hand in the middle of a sleepless night, whispering, "Thank you for staying. I don't know what I'd do without you." Those words weren't about money. They were about love, about recognition, about the choice he had already made in his will. Her chest tightened with clarity. This wasn't about greed. It wasn't about punishment. It was about honoring the truth. She had given years of her life, and this was his way of giving something back. The breaking point wasn't her surrender. It was her realization. And from that moment, she knew her answer wouldn't change. The wedding day drew closer, and with it, the tension reached its peak. Invitations were sent out, but none arrived for her. The silence was its own message. Her sister had followed through on her threat. No money, no seat at the celebration. At first it stung. She had imagined standing in the crowd, watching her sister walk down the aisle, being part of a memory that would last for years. But as she sat alone in her apartment, she realized something deeper. This wasn't her loss. It was her sister's choice to cut her out, to attach a price tag to love and family. When relatives called with guilt-laced words, "You could have fixed this, or it's just $30,000, she stopped defending herself. Instead, she simply said, "Dad made his wishes clear. I'm honoring them, no explanations, no apologies, just the truth." The morning of the wedding, she visited the cemetery instead. She knelt by her father's grave, fingers tracing his name, the cool breeze brushing against her cheeks like a quiet blessing. "I kept my promise," she whispered. "I didn't let them rewrite your wishes." Tears blurred her vision, but there was peace too, a peace she hadn't felt in months. She realized her choice wasn't about money. It was about dignity, boundaries, respect, and in the end, about love, the kind her father had shown her when he entrusted her with his final gift. As music and laughter filled a resort miles away, she stood in the stillness of the graveyard, heart heavy yet unshaken. She hadn't chosen money over family. She had chosen herself. Thank you so much for watching. Till the end, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories.